I don't know why I got hit with a wave of grief, but oh my God. So I am just so grateful that all of you could join us tonight. Matthew McKay, the author of The Luminous Landscape, is here with us. But before we dive into our questions and all of that, I want to invite everybody, let's just join together heart to heart. So just taking a very deep breath and just releasing that. And then another breath, grounding yourself right here, right now, letting go of everything before this present moment. And another breath, breathing in love into your heart system and opening that heart where your wisdom resides. Breathing in and exhaling love, allowing this to form a beautiful circle, knowing that what needs to be asked will be asked tonight, what needs to be heard will be heard, and what needs to be shared will be shared for the highest good of each and every person here tonight, but also for the highest good of humanity's evolution. So again, just becoming very present to now, allowing your heart to be open, your mind to be open. And then one last breath, just opening your eyes, and we will begin. Okay, so Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, like I said before we got on with everyone, everybody was all excited about these questions that we still have and things like that. Is there anything you want to say to everybody before we start?
I'm just glad to be here, and also I want to just express a real appreciation that you're interested in studying and learning more about the afterlife, and appreciate your welcoming Jordan's wisdom.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm just going to dive in with some questions, and they're going to be all over the place, Matt. So I know you can go with the flow. So one of the things that came up as we were going through the book was about our higher selves. If there is a part of the soul that is still in the afterlife when we are incarnated on planet Earth, is that really what we reference as higher self?
My understanding from Jordan is that our soul divides its energy at the point of incarnation. So some of our energy remains in the afterlife, always connected to our soul group, always fully engaged with all the activities of the afterlife. And part of our soul energy, from what I understand from Jordan, then enters a physical body and incarnates. And the Hindu concept of Atman and Jiva, actually, according to Jordan, really turns out to be true. That there is a part of the soul that always stays in the spirit world, and a part of the soul that will enter a body and engage in all of the struggles and the experience of learning that we all experience here. And just one other point about that, the part of the soul that incarnates goes through a forgetting process, an amnesia, which is a necessary part of learning. If we remembered everything about our soul history and the past lives that we've lived and all of the wisdom we've gained, we wouldn't take this life very seriously. It would be like, oh yeah, well, there's this problem and that problem, and I've lost this person and I face this struggle, but it doesn't really matter because I'm going home soon, and this is all just a play that I've been engaged in. So that forgetting is really an essential part of all the learning. We have to take seriously what we face. So we are divided. We have soul energy that always stays in the afterlife, and we can connect to that soul energy. We can actually communicate to our own higher self.
So it is basically our higher wisdom that remains in the afterlife.
Well, it's a part of us that knows everything that we've been through, that remembers all of our past lives, and all of
Mm-hmm.
what we've learned in the course of our soul's history. So that part of us, um, has that fuller knowledge, and we can turn to it and tap into it if we want to communicate with with our higher self that has this more complete sense of what really is going on in the universe, and why we even came here.
But so yeah, so then in tapping into that soul energy that's still on the unseen side, like I like to say, and the afterlife, then we can gain our I want to, so that's part of our intuition, yes, of where we can intuit, okay, oh my life, because so many people come here, what's my purpose, what's my purpose, what's, so you can intuit that by listening and tapping into that soul energy within you.
Yeah, I think that's really, from my understanding, really true. That intuition is a way that we tap into this deeper knowledge, um,
Hmm.
and sometimes we don't even know where that intuition came from. Where did this knowledge come from? How did I know this? How did I feel deeply that something is true, or that I need to do something or not do something? Where does all that come from? And so my understanding is that does come from our higher self. It also, by the way, intuition can come from guides, from
Hmm.
loved ones on the other side, because they're communicating to us all the time as well. So we're getting these whispers of support and encouragement and advice, really, from the other side, and it can be from our higher self, from our deep knowledge of what we've gone through as souls, but it can also come from loved ones and guides who are watching over us, who are with us, who are engaged with us, and who whisper to us sometimes very directly through our consciousness, sometimes in dreams, what we need to do.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of that since I started teaching this book, and dreams and sounds in my house, and but so it's very important that we, as incarnated beings right now, develop our intuition and listen.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of my students had a question about her. She wants to begin to channel with her mother, who's on the other side.
Yeah.
But her mother, when she was incarnated, was a devout Catholic and very, very much afraid of her intuition. And so my student was concerned that her mother might not be willing to have a conversation with her now. But once you cross over, right, then all of those phobias, or most of them, kind of go away once you see, once the veil has lifted and you see why you were here in the first place.
Well, I'm really glad you brought this up, because a lot of our beliefs and our sense of what's true and what's not true uh, basically radically change when we enter the afterlife, the spirit world, because we see what's there, and what's there is very different from what we expected or what we thought or what
Yeah.
belief system or a cosmology would lead us to expect. And so, a person that was a devout Catholic, has some, as I think most of us will have some surprises as we face the afterlife, because there's no judgment there. There's no one sitting and saying, you're in or out. There's heaven and hell. None of that exists, and so all of those expectations that we are going to be evaluated and somehow found wanting and thrown into the fires. All of that doesn't happen, and so you know, uh, someone's expectations based on the Catholic Church, for example, that you can't communicate to the dead, or that the sense that our lives are somehow we're separated from each other in some way.
Right.
All of that turns out, and surprisingly not to be true as people arrive. So I want to say to whoever asked the question that your mother is more than willing and more than prepared to communicate to you, to answer questions, to engage with you. Your mother is already engaged with you. Your mother's already watching over you, paying attention. Um, Something Ralph Messer said to me, who was my guide for years, who taught me how to channel, is that all of our loved ones are just a thought away. All we have to do is think about them. The channel opens, and that person is there and ready on some level to telepathically communicate with us. So your mom is there and is ready, and her beliefs about what the spirit world is, or what the limitations are there, all of those beliefs are now transformed by the reality of what she's experienced in
Mhm. In spirit. So then when that channel opens, Matt, how would you suggest we listen in order to receive information? Do you know what I mean?
well.
There's a multitude of ways, I imagine, but
It starts by, on your end, by saying what you want to say. You may just want to convey love to
mhm.
that soul. I mean, when I think about Jordan, I think about, one of the first things is just to convey love. You are dear to me, and I am with you, and feeling the sense that your loved one is with you. So just opening a channel is just starting with love, your awareness of how much you care for and love that soul. Um, and then if you want to go deeper into the channel, we can talk about how to channel. If you have a desire to do that, I mean, truthfully, I've taught
I
hundreds
think
of people to do it. So I mean, it's hard to do. So if that's something you want to go deeper into, it really then involves, actually on your side, starting to ask questions. What is it that you want to know from your loved one? Oftentimes we start by just, are you okay? Where are you? Are you in a good place? Uh, are you still present? Are you still with me? I mean, those are questions that we often begin with. But then you may want to go deeper. You may want to know more about where your loved one is and what that experience is like for them on the other side, in the spirit world. What are they doing there? You may want to know more about the cosmology of how the spirit world works. So your questions are all appropriate for your loved one. The only thing is unwise to ask is about the future. Jordan's really
mhm.
cautioned me about that. That while those in spirit have some access to what the future brings, because they can see the whole timeline on Earth, uh, they are very loath to convey it or tell us about it, because it takes away our free will. We're here to learn, and if we know what the future is going to be, it actually impacts our ability to learn and take the lessons that we came here to encounter and learn from. So the future is sort of off limits, but everything else you can ask your loved ones for advice. I do it all the time with Jordan. What should I do about this or that? How do I deal? What do I do? I mean, before I came on tonight with all of you, I asked Jordan to just help me and support me, to give you everything you need, and to be present with you, and whatever you're looking for. Hopefully, I can provide some of it. So we can ask our loved ones for support, for advice, for guidance, and also about what that world is that they live in.
Yeah. So I have two things to say then, Matt. The first one is, when I announced this class, I don't think I told you, Jordan, it was in front of the church. Jordan came in through the electrical system, through the sound system, because there was a chant that we always sing, I am remembering who I am. And it was on multi levels, and the person in charge of everything thought it was a misfunction, but I got loud and clear. It was Jordan going, I'm here, And then the first night of class, and I feel him right now, the first night of class, I just felt this whole So he was there the whole time with all of us in all the classes, I believe, just being accessible. And I'm so deeply grateful for his willingness to participate in that way, because there were lots of things that got answered that I didn't have the answer to, you know. So so I just wanted you to know that, Matt, because he's been invaluable, as you well know. But the other thing I want to ask is, those of us whose relationship toward the end of our loved one's life was maybe not so awesome,
Mhm.
how do we move? I know exactly what the answer is, damn it, but how you know, if you've had a contentious relationship with somebody who's passed, and then they are trying to get a hold of you, right? Knock knock, here I am, I'm right here, what do you want to know? I want to tell you something. How do we best navigate that? Forgiveness, you know, of course, forgiveness and moving into love. Did I just answer my own question, you guys?
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's what you're talking about seems really important to me. You know, in this world, we are stuck in some ways in terms of our own limited perspective and
Hmm.
our emotions. Things hurt us. We get into conflicts. We get conflicted relationships with those we love. All that goes on here. Now, once a person passes over to the other side, in the spirit world, they're not beset by these emotions. These issues subside. In fact, you can't even get into the spirit world if you're overwhelmed with anger or some other intense human emotion, or there's all kinds of residuals from your past life that you haven't really worked through or resolved. So your loved one in the afterlife is not stuck in that drama, in that
Uh-huh.
in that conflict that may have existed. They are well beyond it. In the afterlife, everything is love, and they see you with love. They, you know, those old issues, those conflicts, those struggles, just fall away, are no longer part of how they are. Uh, no longer part of what they need or are concerned with. That anger is gone, whatever it might have been. Uh, all of that subsides. So you're now dealing with someone who is is beyond that, and who sees you and their love and life with you in the context of all of their history and their many lives, their many relationships, and all the love they feel for, you know, all the souls who matter to them. So that's who they are in the afterlife. They're still themselves. They still have their personality, but all those conflicts, those struggles, are gone, and so you can contact them without fear that, you know, that old hurt or struggle or conflict is going to suddenly block or show up in the communication.
Okay, so I want to ask you about this. So most often, if one of our loved ones, I'm thinking about people that have perpetrated not such good stuff
Yeah.
on people, right? And so when they're trying to get to, let's talk about disincarnated souls that come back and they want to mess with people, or they didn't even get to the other side yet. How do we know that? How can we know and trust the difference of that? Do you know what I'm saying?
Okay, so there are different levels here. I mean, on one level, there are souls who die and they don't know they're dead, or they were so involved in the struggles and the conflicts and the drama of their
Hmm.
life immediately preceding death, that they aren't quite ready, or not kind of listening to the urge to move to the afterlife. And so they, you know, these become ghosts, and they for a little period of time are often stuck in and around the area where they lived or died, and uh, are, you know, painfully caught there. They're still, you know, so engaged with their human emotions and the unresolved drama, that they are continuing to observe the life and the world that they lived in. So yeah, so there are ghosts, and they're temporary. Sometimes they last just a little while. Sometimes they last in Earth years, some period of time. But eventually, every soul will feel the tug and start allowing and moving out of the physical plane and into what in Jordan calls the landing place.
Mm-hmm.
And in the landing place, they start to go through, we all do as we arrive there, this kind of adjustment. We've lost our nervous system, we've lost this physical body, our emotions are changing, our perceptions are changing. Instead of seeing straight ahead, we see in 360. Instead of listening, we communicate telepathically. So everything is changing. So we're going through this enormous adjustment period for a little while in the landing place. Now, if souls are really struggling with a lot of intensive emotions, residual energy from struggles and drama of their immediate past life, they may for a while need to go to a healing place. They go sometimes to bardos where guides reconstruct some of the drama that they're struggling with and help them resolve and work through that drama and some of that pain. And so there may be a period for some souls who just haven't worked through and are unprepared to let go of the emotions and the pain from their immediate life. There may be this transitional period where they work on that in the healing places or in the bardos. Eventually, though, when souls are ready, and by the way, this is not the majority of people. This is the majority of souls actually pretty quickly matriculate into the afterlife and the spirit world. But there is a minority who really are struggling and really are not ready to let go of all the drama and the pain and the emotions of a past life. And so they go through a period of transition. The rest move pretty quickly into the afterlife and go through some of the early stages of the afterlife. So we could talk about that if you want, but I'm just wanting to, emphasize that, we do have ghosts who get stuck here a little while they are figuring out that they died, or just working through whatever intense emotion they had in the immediately preceding their death. And then we have people that go through a period of transition and in the healing places in the bardos where they're working through some of the struggles that they had in their most immediate life. But most souls do move into the afterlife rather quickly and are ready.
So this is another question that came up in the class about karma. So in the agreement, the pre-planning of reincarnating, right? And there's agreements made, I'll be the perpetrator, the villain, and you'll be the victim, or however that works. Is there karma or that happens because someone says, okay, I'll be the bad guy? Or is it like you don't get, if you're incarnating to be the bad guy in someone else's life, are you then going to have to work through all the bad stuff you did, even though you made the agreement before everybody incarnated?
Yeah, that's really an important question. My understanding from Jordan is that karma doesn't work that way. Karma is not like payback or punishment. Like, you did something bad to somebody, and now you're going to have to experience that pain that you inflicted in some future life. It just isn't like that. Karma is basically a lesson plan. It's like we're all, involved in learning, and what karma is, from one life to the next, is if there were certain lessons that you were working on that you didn't complete in that past life, you're probably going to be working on them in the next life. So
that's more for the individual soul who didn't follow the lesson plan.
Well,
karma.
we're all we each of us have a lesson plan, and most of the time we are working from life to life on our lesson plan. The lesson plan is not completed in one life. We're still learning, and we go into the next life, and part of our lesson plan in the next life is to continue what we were learning in the last one, or maybe over a number of lives. We're still working on something. You know, for example, let's say a soul is working on um, being willing and courageous enough to face pain, uh, and in the service of being loving or caring or doing the things that need to be done in their lives. And so, you know, and others are working on courage. And so, you know, they may, you know, face different challenges in a particular life where there are choices about, you know, do you, you know, do you face certain kinds of pain in the service of love?
Hmm.
Do you shrink back from that? Does fear keep you from acting on love in the face of pain? And so you're working on that challenge, and you may not really entirely work through that lesson in a particular life. So in another life, you are going to also start facing challenges and situations in which that choice shows up. You know, am I willing to face pain in the service of love, or do I shrink back from that? So I'm you know, trying to talk about this from the point of view not of payback, like punishment, like I did X in one life and now I'm going to have to suffer exactly what I did to somebody else. It doesn't really work like that. It's like I'm engaged with a long term lesson plan. You know, sort of like going to high school. It's like, okay, well, I didn't learn it in civics in my freshman year. There's some more things I'm going to learn, you know, in my sophomore year, in my junior year. You know, I'm going to keep learning, and you know, so it's not that I have to figure this all out in one lifetime. So the lesson plan will go over any number of lives, but not with punishment, not with, you know, you did something wrong, you screwed up, and now we're going to pay you back. It's more like, okay, I haven't finished and figured this out yet. I haven't been able to face how to love in the face of pain. I don't know how to do that. I'm going to work on that as in multiple situations over
Hmm.
lives.
I love the phrase you used, Matt, of face pain in the service of love. And because the spiritual center that most of the people on this call that we belong to, it's about serving love. That's part of the mission statement. So I love facing pain in the service of love. That's beautiful. So I'm looking at the questions. Hold on. Somebody wanted to know what happens to children if they've died, you know, at a very early age. Is there a special landing place for them, or they just all, you know, they're all part of the soul, so they just go to their landing place?
No. There's an individual landing place for every one of us. So the landing place is prepared, you know, given, you know, what planet we lived on, you know. So, you know, very often people who from this planet go to a landing place that has gardens and, you know, beautiful growing plants and so forth. Whereas a soul that was on a watery planet would have an entirely different landing place in terms of things that are familiar and comforting to them, images and experiences that are comforting to them. So the landing place is designed specifically, not just for each person, each soul in terms of where they come from, which planet, but each soul in terms of what their experience is. So a child's experience is different from an adult's. And so the landing place for a child is going to be designed to help them adjust from the world as they knew it. And so, so again, it's particular and made for us to help
Hmm.
us, you know, deal with this really kind of unsettling transition from being incarnate to being in spirit. So yeah, it's very specific and particular, and it's all and it's imagery. It's not, a landing place is not made of matter. It's made of energy, and so
Right.
we're shown an energetic landscape made of energy for us to feel this first, to deal with the transition and to feel as comfortable as we can as we get used to not being embodied.
So, so this is another question that came early on in the classes. Do we ever incarnate as something other than a human being?
No.
Okay.
Now that's that idea that we can come back as insects and
Or animals or
all that stuff is it just doesn't happen. And I can say that with relative certainty. I mean, Jordan has told me that, but if you read Michael Newton's work, who wrote Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, and he did life between life regressions with like 7,000 people. No one reported choosing a life as an animal or an insect or anything else. And there's a reason for this. Our guides and the folks who help us choose our next incarnation want us to be able to live in bodies where choice is possible, where there's free will, where we can learn things. So we have to enter a physical body, whether it's on this planet as Homo sapiens or other planets, a physical body in which choice is possible, in which learning is possible, because that's why we incarnate, to learn. And so insects are not doing a lot of learning. A rhinoceros, for all of its fierceness, is only learning enough to manage its environment and deal with threats and predators and prey and so forth. So none of that would be appropriate for us. Those creatures would not be appropriate for us to incarnate in, because we need to be able to choose and we need to be able to learn.
So then, Matt, what about animals? Like, several of us here have had animals that have crossed over. I, for one, know that cat incarnated as a dog, incarnated as another dog. I've had 2 dogs come to me in dreams saying, "I'm coming back, come find me," that kind of thing. So do pets, dogs, cats, whatever, tend to come back because they're part of our soul group with us individually, or do they just all run their own, in their own pasture, doing their own thing?
Well, I don't know a lot about this, so I have to acknowledge that to begin with. I know that I'm aware of a lot of mediums who report seeing animals with loved, souls on the other side, and the animal is with them, their pet or beloved animal. And I know, I worked with a medium who saw Jordan with our dachshund, little black dachshund on the other side. So so this is not uncommon, where mediums report seeing loved ones with beloved pets. When I've asked Jordan about it, I finally got around to actually asking this question recently, and he said, here's the way it works. Not every single animal who's ever lived is involved in an incarnational pattern, or that their conscious energy ends up in the afterlife. But animals that we've invested love and connection with elevates their consciousness and they do their consciousness in a way that they will be present for us in the afterlife. So it's our relationship that brings them into the afterlife, as opposed to every animal that's ever existed, every insect, every thing is somehow crowding into this enormous jungly afterlife. It's actually more the animals that we have invested love and have loved us. That relationship may elevate them to a point where they enter the afterlife on some level.
Okay, thanks for that. So the next question is, we always stay in the same soul group after we've come back from being incarnated and are so changed? Do we because Jordan, you guys wrote about after every incarnation, the souls are different when they come back to their soul group, and there's a whole learning of the new energy systems. Do we at some point move to a different soul group because our energy system is different from our original group?
No, we stay with the same soul group. And through hundreds of incarnations, we will stay with the same group, soul group. Now, just, to kind of explore this a little bit, there are all of these neighboring soul groups. You can think about, if you think about the afterlife, it's this vast array of light, actually, and and each soul group you can think of as a house, and then neighboring soul groups are on that same block cycle, in spiritually speaking, and but then we actually have we incarnate, and we end up in lives where we develop relationships with souls from very different soul groups, soul groups that might on some level be far away, psychologically or spiritually, another city, another country on some level from the little soul group that we live in. And so, and yet we develop a love and connection there. So we do have relationships with souls that are, way, way beyond our particular soul group, but we do come back to our soul group. We have a group of souls, or there are soul groups around us where we have incarnated with those souls and have relationships, deep, sometimes very deep and loving relationships with neighboring soul groups. So all of that is going on, and so there's but there's a consistency there. We always come back to the same souls, and we always basically incarnate with the same souls. And there's these very deep relationships that are formed over many, many lives. And it's sort of like, incarnating is like, this is kind of not a really great analogy, but it's kind of like going to war in some ways. You're going to this very difficult, challenging place together, and you're all, going to have these various relationships in that place and face all kinds of struggles and challenges in that place, and then you come back and you're changed by that experience. And there's a period where souls really have to go through an adjustment, like, they've gone through a lot. It's kind of like if you knew somebody in college and then you saw them 25 years later. Well, they've been through a lot in those 25 years. You knew them very well in the dorm, but they've gone through a lot. They've felt a lot. They faced a lot, and you have to kind of get to know them a little bit again, because they're now doing all these new experiences back into the relationship. So yeah, there's a transitional period where souls kind of get used to what each of them have learned and experienced in a particular incarnation.
So this brings up a point. This is for me. It's not on my list, but because of what's going on in the world, and you mentioned the word war, do soul groups incarnate into the same countries?
Well, typically, yes. Soul groups will incarnate into the same geographic area and the same time period. I mean, like, Jordan and I certainly, were many years apart in terms of when we arrived on Earth, but we eventually, but we encountered each other at some point, and that's what happens for soul groups. Will show up in the same geographical area in the same time period, because they're going to likely connect in some way over that lifetime in that particular area. Now, sometimes a soul that's in our group will show up in another country, but there's an expectation that our lives will cross in some way, or paths cross, and our relationship will rekindle at that point. So it's not always that we're incarnating in the exact same geographical areas, but there's a plan for us to encounter it at some place at some time.
It's fascinating to me that war-torn countries have been having war for centuries in the same areas, like what we're witnessing right now. in Russia and Ukraine and the surrounding areas. So what's fascinating to me about that is, did they just not get it the first time? So now they're just coming back and until they finally get it? Or is it because it's a global getting? It's for the global humanity to understand now.
Well, there's a history of old grudges, and
Mm.
when you're born into a certain location and a certain environment, um, you absorb the prejudices, the beliefs that have been part of that world for centuries, maybe. Um,
Right.
and who was an enemy 200 years ago is still an enemy on some level. There's still antipathy, and you absorb all of those prejudices, and so now they're yours in this particular incarnation, and you begin to act on and respond to those prejudices with aggressive behavior. So I mean, I think there's some truth in the fact that if a soul enters an area where there's been a long history of warfare and struggle, and one country pitted against another, they in a particular incarnation will tend to absorb those beliefs and get
Hmm.
caught up in whatever that
Hmm.
struggle is.
And unless they become consciously aware enough in the incarnation, that they're here to be of service in love.
Yeah, and so that's really, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because souls, we talk about old souls and then souls that are relatively young. Souls that are relatively new to this of incarnating are very easily influenced by their body, by their emotions, by the physical demands of their body, their desires. So they're often, in lives early in a soul's experience. Um, these early lives are often dominated by what their body demands of them, and they don't really have a whole lot of soul wisdom to help them navigate, and so they end up often just focusing on pleasure and trying to avoid pain, and their lives are just sort of dominated by that, and they really often don't have quite yet figured out their core values, what really matters. Um, and because their life is so dominated by this physical body that they've been. As souls, develop and have more lives that they've lived and more wisdom that they've acquired, they reach a point where they can bring some of their soul knowledge into their life, into a particular incarnation. Of course, we all forget. We all go through amnesia. We forget, who we were in all the past lives when we enter in a particular body. But we do, as we get more mature as souls, and as we have grown and learned from many, many lives, we bring some of that wisdom with us. Some of the wisdom from our higher self becomes available to us and helps guide us. And also we have support from loved ones and guides on the other side also helping us. And so this is a long, I'm sorry, involved answer.
No, that's good.
So now a soul who's a little bit more advanced comes to a war-torn area where all these prejudices exist and all these, old ideas about who my enemy is and all that stuff. And they're a little more immune to it. There's a part of them that has this deep sense of wisdom of, wait a minute, we're all in this together. It's not us against them. And there's a whole tribal idea, wait a minute, maybe we're not just tribes, maybe we're all connected in some deep way through love. And there's this beginning wisdom that begins to enter into their awareness as they struggle with whatever the prejudices and beliefs are of the particular region they've been born into. So we see that as more mature souls are more immune to and more resistant to some of these beliefs and prejudices, and they're more aware of this fundamental value of love, and they carry that with them uh, in spite of living in a world in which there's all kinds of anger and hurt.
Yeah, we saw that in Africa during the apartheid and with Desmond Tutu and
Exactly.
Mandela, and right where they moved beyond the experience of what they saw or felt or what was perpetrated
More
in
advanced
order
people,
to love. Yeah,
were able to lead and help
yeah,
others who were less advanced to see what needed to be done there. Yes, yes.
yeah. So then, Matthew, a couple other questions. Uh, One of our students was her uncle. She was guided. She felt like she was guided to be with him in the car when he had a cardiac arrest, and so her question is this intuitive? Was it intuitive guidance, or was it part of a soul plan that she needed to be there at that time? You know, he survived it, but at that time, in order to help him get through that.
You know, that's another wonderful question, and I'm not sure I know the answer to it. I mean, there are different ways that could have played out. Uh, you know, she may have had a deep awareness that her uncle was in danger or was in some way vulnerable, and that awareness was coming from soul knowledge and knowledge of her own soul. It may have been something that was planned, that she she was going to be there for her uncle at that moment as part of in order to support him to make some sort of to face some very difficult moment in his life. So it could have been part of a plan. It may have also been just something that guides supported her to make that decision to show up at that moment, because that was important, that he needed support. So there are all kinds of different ways that could have played out.
Right.
But what I guess on a kind of a deeper level, I think a lot of the choices we make in life are whether we're listening to love or not. And the whispers and voice inside of us of love, what would love have me do at this moment? And I think as we mature as souls, and in any particular lifetime as we mature, we're more and more able to hear that. What would love have me do in this moment? And so I think we become more available to and able to take in that deeper knowledge, and it helps guide us.
Yeah, I hear that. Olga, you had a
Can I,
question?
can I, yeah, piggyback on that question, Matthew? Um, in this instance, had this woman niece not showed up for her uncle, I guess what I'm trying to ask is how much of that's predetermined? So had she not been there, would he have passed away? Is part of the plan, ahead of time, your start and expiration date, let's say, for when you transition, or is there a certain amount of the free will, and depending if she had not listened to her intuition, hadn't shown up, would he have passed? But she was there, so he didn't. So do you see what I'm saying? I mean, how much of it is predetermined and you're gonna transition when you transition, and there's nothing that's going to change that. It is what it is. It's predetermined.
It's not exactly this is my understanding from Journey. It's not exactly predetermined. It's not like there's this absolute date, that we're going to die, and come hell or high water, that's going to happen. But we certainly at different points in our lives go through vulnerabilities, and we are at in danger of transitioning and death. But I think it's not so much about there was some plan to keep the uncle alive at that moment. I mean, there could have been. I'm not saying that there wasn't, but it's not so much that there was a plan that to keep them alive and that was destiny. It's more like the person who showed up for him had a choice, and had and exercised their ability to choose, their free will, to show up at that moment of and support him. And And it's not so much that, there was some sort of destiny that he needed to stay alive for a little longer. But it's about, that person making that choice and exercising free will to show up at a moment of extreme urgency for someone they loved. I think it's sort of closer to that than there's a plan that everybody has to in lockstep, make sure happens.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Mari, you want to ask a question?
Yeah. So it was my uncle, and I lived in San Francisco and he lived in LA, but our aunt had died and my sister and I were helping clear out his house, or her house rather. And we wanted to go take him to a movie called Forks Over Knives because he's vegetarian. And I think that everything you've said is right on. But the one niggling thing I have is that I asked him if he wanted to go on the Sunday when we were talking about it in the evening, or the next day, Memorial Day bargain matinee. And he said, I don't care. And I didn't care. But the little voice in my head said tomorrow bargain matinee. Like it really actually said those words in my head. So I said, okay, let's just do tomorrow bargain matinee. If I hadn't said that, then I wouldn't have been with him, and he lived alone and my sister and I weren't staying with him. So he would have passed. And there was a series of miracles around the whole experience having to do with the fact that there were two people in the car behind us. We were at a stoplight. They knew CPR. I mean, there was a series of miracles around that event. So that's why I think there was way more involved than just free will, because it was like a bombardment of miracles.
Yeah, that's quite an extraordinary experience and story. And I'm not, I can't really speak for what exactly happened there, but it sounds like, it sounds like what was going on was that your uncle had more things to do in this life, and he had more learning to do, or there were specific things that still waited to be done, learned. I'm not sure. And so the guides were setting things up so that he could get through that challenge and go on to first have more time to learn those things. And and the guys were supporting other people around you, the people in the car that knew CPR, to help him survive a little longer, so that he could continue whatever his karmic learning process might be. There's more that he needed to do. And my wife was for many years an oncology nurse, and she would say over and over again, people die only when they're ready. When they whatever they've needed to do, they've done, and they will wait sometimes because there's more that needs to be done, something else that needs to be said, some other important communication that hasn't happened yet, and they will wait. So I think that he may have had more work to do. That's the sense of it. And so guides were helping those around him to keep him alive longer to do that work. But then there's also things. There are things. There were lessons that you learned. Yeah. I think from that experience, if I may say, there may be lessons that the people in the car with the CPR learned from that experience that were all part of your lesson plan, their lesson plan, and this was an opportunity to advance your learning in the service of also keeping him alive for his learning.
Yeah, I think so. Because there's a lot of energy in that place. And it was in the middle of an intersection. Of course, we were stopped at a red light, another miracle. And these guys pulled him out of the car and started on him. And I was trying to call 911. And I was so focused on him that when I looked up, there was a circle of about 12 people around us. And everybody was on their phones calling. So I remember thinking, oh yeah, LA, City of Angels. So that was a real thought that crossed my mind.
Could I
But
ask you a question?
there was so much a vortex of energy that I don't have words to describe it. That was a force that I could feel that it was making me shake. It was so strong.
Yeah.
So it was quite profound. My sister told me I was never the same after that experience. But
Matthew, you wanted to ask her a question?
Yeah, I just was wondering if I could ask, knowing your uncle and, maybe a little bit more of what happened subsequent to that. Were there reasons why your uncle needed to stay alive? Were there things that he might have been learning or
there was a couple of roles that he got to do in musical theater. He's an actor and a voiceover actor, that Mindy and I, my sister and I, said, oh, he was totally meant to do this role. So yeah, I think in terms of that, he wasn't done.
Yeah. And the guys and the forces on the other side were working to keep him alive a little longer so he could do those things. There may also have been things he needed to do with loved ones that we don't know anything about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hear you.
Thank you, Mari, for illuminating us.
Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
So there's a couple more questions on our list that people wanted us to ask. One was about the Akashic records, and when hold on. Does the access to the Akashic records close when a universe is complete and thus cannot be revisited? Or do we have access to the Akashic records for all of the different experiences of history and universes and planets?
Well, it's very interesting what just happened. I mean, Jordan communicates to me, spontaneously. And I don't really know the answer to that question. What he just told me was that the record remains. It's like a book, and the book isn't destroyed just because the story in the book has ended. And so a universe that ends or a planet that ends, even when you think about a life that ends, the record of that life, that planet, that universe is retained for whatever learning could be had in it. All the divine creates universes to learn, creates us, our individual souls, to go out and interact with these physical universes and environments to learn. And so it's really important to retain what's been learned and go on to it. And that knowledge is in those records. That knowledge is held by all, and we have access to that knowledge both through the Akashic records of previous universes, planets, human incarnations. We have access to all that, but we also can join with all, and all souls have an opportunity in the afterlife to go through periods of merger with all, and can learn a great deal in those periods of merging, of just downloading awareness and knowledge and experience from the mind of all. So we've access to that knowledge through the records, the Akashic records, but also through our relationship to the divine.
Makes a lot of sense to me. So then someone asked, is there a reason if we're incarnating on other planets, is there a reason why the human beings on planet Earth haven't found life on other planets?
Well, again, this is sort of beyond what I personally know, but my understanding is that there are, literally hundreds of thousands of other environments in which souls live and grow and develop, and not just this one. And so, why aren't we having contact with them? Well, first of all, technologically, we haven't reached a point where we have radio telescopes and things like that, but we haven't really reached a point where we are in a position to physically connect to other souls that are incarnating elsewhere. Now, it may be that some of these other planets are technologically able to connect, and that's aliens and all kinds of other possibilities about that they're aware of us, but we're not aware of them. So I don't know exactly why that is, but my understanding is that we incarnate on so many more places than Earth. Also what I've been told, what Jordan has conveyed to me, is that Earth is a very difficult place here incarnated. It's a difficult planet for several reasons. Mostly because of the bodies we inhabit here. These bodies are so beset by emotions, by desire, by impulses, so focused on finding pleasure and avoiding pain that we're hardwired in that way. And so we enter these bodies, and it's really hard to tame them. It's hard to work inside a body that is suddenly filled with emotion and drives and impulses. And so we and because of that, we have all of these souls around us also riding these bucking bronco bodies and colliding into each other and sometimes hurting each other and attacking each other, using each other in various ways, because they're all very, the bodies are demanding that, they have pleasure and avoid pain and let me get what I want. And there's this egocentricity and essential narcissism that's built into these physical bodies. And so we have a lot of work to do. So in this environment and living in these bodies, living in a planet with over 7 billion of these bodies, and souls trying to, function inside of them. It is very difficult. It's a very challenging place for that reason. It's a very beautiful place, but a very challenging place.
Thank you. So does anybody have another question? I've gone through most of the questions that we gathered during class. Does anybody have anything they want to ask Matt?
Say, I'm happy to spend time with you. So I'm not like, if you have questions, I'm happy to be here and, explore and, say whatever Jordan helps me with.
Yeah. Olga?
I had a question regarding children or those souls that come in. I could never understand a child dying at such a young age, or stillbirths, or those sort of things. Is that a soul that thought they were ready to re-enter and something happens? So, or what do we know? Or what do you understand and know about that you can share, Matthew?
Yeah, in the history of Homo sapiens, the average offspring lived 5 years. So the vast majority of souls who incarnate as human sapiens would not live very long. And so, I kind of want to put that in context. Of course, in our world, that's not what we expect. We expect, people to be born and to live, long lives. But in fact, as souls who incarnate on this planet are used to the idea that this particular life may not last very long, and it's not on the other side viewed tragically. We view it tragically. I certainly experienced it tragically when I lost Jordan. This is a horrendous, life-changing event when you lose a child. But souls on the other side who are fully aware of all their history of incarnations and the history of this planet are aware that we typically don't live that long, and so we come here for oftentimes relatively short lives, and we're learning things in that relatively short life that are really important. And, and of course, Jordan certainly lived more than 5 years. He lived to 23, but he had a lot of things he was learning in those 23 years. And they were really important part of the development of his soul. And so even a child that dies young has learned all kinds of things. They may have learned a lot about love in just a very, very few years. They may have learned a lot about pain and struggle in just a very few years. They may have learned a lot about, facing, difficult, challenging things. So I just want to say that this idea of dying young is very tragic from our point of view, and I certainly know that and feel that. And souls incarnate without that sense of tragedy. They incarnate knowing that they're going to have a relatively short life, and they have certain lesson plans that they're going to have in life.
The other reason I ask, I just had a friend whose daughter is in her late 20s, just had 2 stillbirths in a row. And so those babies never even got to live life. And so is the lesson that soul's lesson was something she needs to learn about herself in that loss of losing a baby that never really got to live what we would call a human life because never got that far.
For her, there are important lessons in that experience about facing loss. I wouldn't even dare to conjecture what those lessons are, but
right.
She faced that particular tragedy because there was something in her lesson plan about facing loss and
right.
working with it. Now, as far as the babies themselves, if a baby was never going to be born, a soul may have never entered that fetus.
Oh, okay. Got it.
There may usually souls enter because there's going to be an opportunity for life and to experience something that were lessons.
Oh, I never thought of that. That makes perfect sense. Okay.
Yeah. So it may not have been that, and in fact, it may have been well known that fetus would never fully mature and be able to enter this life in this world. And so no soul was really assigned to that.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So this brings up a point, Matthew. Can you expand on the law of change?
Yeah. So, I mean, in order to kind of understand the law of changing, first of all, we have to think about the law of cause and effect. That things happen because certain events happen because of all kinds of other events that led up to it, and oftentimes these events we can't even we have no concept or knowledge of. Somebody shows up in the news and they did something weird, amazing, terrible, whatever it is, and there's a whole chain of cause and effect that led up to that moment. And for the most part, we could never even imagine what it is. We might read in the newspaper that so-and-so's mother was died young, or so-and-so's father was mean to them. But we have no concept of what the chain of cause and effect is. But looking at the kashic record, we can see the whole chain of cause and effects that lead to a particular moment in time and a particular choice that a soul makes incarnate. So there's and I just somehow lost track of the question. And the question was what?
The
cause and effect.
Laws of change. Laws of change, right?
Laws of change.
So laws of change have to do with learning how to insert kind of like levers of small choices, small acts, small behaviors that shift the balance of cause and effect in such a way that major change occurs. You say X instead of Y, and because of that, something very different happens. so laws of change have to do with knowing what might impact the laws of cause and effect in such a way that at a certain moment in time, that chain of cause and effect is vulnerable to being shifted, altered, um, transformed in some way. There's a vulnerable moment in that chain that something could enter there and could alter the course of a person's life, of even history itself. And so learning how to do that and learning to recognize those vulnerable places where we can enter into the chain of cause and effect and really change and move things in a different direction. That learning how to do that is something that a lot of souls are engaged in. And Jordan actually is engaged in that, excuse me, in the afterlife, learning how to do that.
So my question around that, so then it changes the potentiality of a life or an era of history.
Or just a small, could be a small thing. It could be just, something you say to your child. I bet most people who have kids have had experience of a kid saying later, when you said blah, 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 that really had an impact on me, or that, God, that really stuck with me, or when you did such and such, that really, I really took notice of that. So when you think about, your own child, there are moments where you say or do something that actually shift that child's perceptions, perhaps their values, perhaps what they want or care about. So there are moments when we sometimes can intervene and help move that child in a different direction. So hopefully for good, sometimes not. So in our own lives, we have that experience of sometimes using the laws of change to make a difference. And and on a larger scale, of course, this can happen in moments where people make choices that affect all of history.
So then this law of change can be accessed from the spirit world by just a little drop of a suggestion. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, no, yes and no. I mean, sometimes guides who are familiar with the laws of change might whisper to us that, and encourage us to do something and to take a certain action, knowing that that's going to have a ripple effect, that's going to impact things in ways that are desirable, or ways that in the spirit world, there's a plan for making something happen. So they're encouraging us to make a small choice that might have this kind of ripple effect, and using the laws of change. But also in the spirit world, souls are learning the principles of the laws of change. And let me tell you, I hope this is not too much of a shaggy dog story, but I do a lot of regressions with people who want to discover past lives and life between lives. And I was working with a gentleman who actually is a Catholic priest, and was looking at it. We were looking at his life between lives, but initially, to get into the life between lives, you go into the immediate past life. And in his past life, he had been a soldier fighting for Russia in the Second World War, and he was involved in liberating one of the Nazi concentration camps. And as they began to approach the concentration camp, there was this incredible battle that took place, and he saw the souls of the dying soldiers all kind of leaving their bodies and moving upward. When he died in that battle, he gets to the afterlife, and he's beginning to prepare for entering this life shortly after, just actually within a year or so after his death in that battle, he enters this life, re-enters this life. And and as they prepare to he prepares to re-enter, he's aware of all of these souls who are, he described it as parachuting in, all these advanced souls that are parachuting in, who have knowledge of the laws of change, because there's going to be this major effort to shift where this world is going, and that all these people are showing up at this time and place and this era, all on some deep level networking together to make fundamental change, because they have this special knowledge of the laws of change and how to make things different. So anyway, obviously they haven't parachuted into Moscow very much, and we have some very regressed people over there. But what I am getting at is that this is an era where people with the souls who have the special knowledge of laws of change are showing up en masse. That was what he described to me.
That actually gives me hope with everything that's going on in the world right now, as opposed to amping up my fear. So thank you for that. Does anybody else want to have a question for Matt? Mari? And then Kathy.
This will be quicker than the Uncle Pete story. So if you have a dream and it's so real that you wake up sobbing that you had a conversation with a loved one, what is there any meaning behind that, or is it my wishful thinking?
No.
Okay.
I absolutely. I have to say, there's dreams that we have that are just products of our own, mental processes and sleep. But when you have a dream that's so vivid and so real, and in that dream you're getting communication with someone you love on the other side, there's a connection to that person. Almost invariably, that's a visitation. And souls on the other side. This is not universal. I mean, souls have different levels of skill in terms of entering our dreams. Some souls are not very good at it. Some souls are actually quite advanced and are really, really, really good at creating dreamscapes for us that convey important lessons and communication to us. So when you have that experience of vividness, of the presence of that soul, in my experience, it's almost invariably a visitation, a very real moment of connection between you and that soul on the other side.
I felt it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy, you had a question?
Yeah, so I'm wondering, I guess, about time, and knowing that time is not necessarily linear, or isn't linear here. And I believe we discussed about maybe incarnating in different timelines. I know it's not often, but maybe you can incarnate in the past, or I guess in the future. And I'm wondering if that's part of the law of change. If you go into the past and then you can tweak something that will change the timeline, or how does that work? Is that true? Can you incarnate in different timelines?
God, this is just a wonderful question, and such I wish I could give the fullest answer possible, but I don't know all of the ways that this works. But I do know some things. That soul, from the afterlife, we can see the whole history of the earth from beginning to end, and the history of Homo sapiens from beginning to end on this planet. And so we're from the afterlife, we look into this place, but we can see the entire scope of time from the afterlife. It's sort of like, if there was a river of time, from the afterlife, we can stand on any point in the bank of that river, from the headwaters all the way to where it empties into the sea. We could see every moment of that river standing on the bank from the afterlife. So we have that ability to look at the full scope of time, and we also have the ability as incarnating souls to enter in terms of the history of Homo sapiens. Once Homo sapiens got to the point where souls were incarnating into these bodies, I mean, because there's a point where Homo sapiens had not developed enough to have choice and to be able to and a capacity to learn sufficient to be appropriate to host souls who are incarnating. But at the point that happened, anywhere from that point where souls could, were first entering these bodies to the very end of time on this planet, a soul could incarnate into a body and at any point in that timeline. Now, souls typically don't do that because it's very jarring. It's like, so let's say your most recent incarnation is here. You're unlikely to choose to go back to the Stone Age. I mean, it's just such the discontinuity between the world that you knew in your most immediate past life and the world that you're entering would be just overwhelming. The same reason you might not, progress to, some point in the distant future, assuming hopefully we have a distant future, because again, there's to be an incredible discontinuity. So we tend to incarnate near the time we most recently incarnated because things are familiar. If for example, you died in the 1920s and came back in the 1940s or 50s, well, there's still trains, there are planes, there's all kinds of familiar elements to life that you're not in a world that's like you show up and there's nothing that makes any sense. There's nothing familiar. So souls tend to incarnate linearly in that way, but they don't have to. They don't have to. And also, by the way, it's also true that souls don't have to incarnate to the same planet. There are souls that choose actually to move from one planet to another. Sometimes it's just because the planet is dying and the species that they're incarnating into is dying out. But sometimes they actually will choose to move to another planet. And souls who come from other planets and come here often have a really difficult time because it's a tough place. And these hybrid souls who come from another planet, who incarnated elsewhere for most of their lives, come here, and they often struggle for a number of incarnations to get used to this place. That's just I'm going on and on here. I'm probably not answering your question very well. I apologize.
No, that was fabulous. Did he answer your question, Kathy?
Yeah, he did. And then, well, I don't even know. So the cause and effect thing, and I'm going to bring something up we really didn't talk about, but
okay, can I say one other thing?
Yeah.
That actually, Jordan has been telling me this recently, that for example, if you make a choice in this life, it not only affects the future, but it actually can affect the past. That actually, the things we choose actually can have some power to change the past, which is sort of blows my mind. But what he just was telling me recently is, that stuff when you forget things? Well, sometimes the forgetting process is not just forgetting, it's that the thing literally didn't happen. It's gone. That past event actually didn't occur. So we actually do have some capacity to the choices we make both move forward and backwards in terms of their effect. So I just wanted to add that. I'm sorry to interrupt you. If we make a certain choice now, sometimes that has a retrospective change, and that actually our environment changes unbeknownst to us, because we don't realize that it's changed. It's just like things are different, but we don't know that because we made a choice, something changed in the past as a result of that choice, and now our world is a little different. And we don't see that difference because we don't realize that it's happened. So there is stuff that like that my understanding is that goes on. And
okay, that makes sense.
And I would suggest, I think I mentioned this in class, you guys, we can do that. We can affect that now. You can, through the power of love, shift your ancestral belief systems that you've been handed and support those individuals that came before you through love to shift. So I'm just saying. Christine, you wanted to ask a question?
I was just wondering, does it matter if the person has already incarnated elsewhere? Is that line of communication no matter what, because a piece of their energy from the soul group always spirit as mine does?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. A part of our energy always remains in the soul group, always remains in the spirit world. And Jordan is already incarnated. He's a little, not even little girl anymore. He's, and So he's in another life,
Wow.
but I can continue to communicate to him in the spirit world because a part of his energy always remains there. And oh, by the way, part of my energy, a part of your energy always remains in spirit. And so we actually are having relationships in the spirit world that, you know, we're not privy to, but are going on anyway. And from here, from you know our incarnated lives, we can also have relationships, and as you are communicating to loved ones in the spirit world, and you can continue to do that even if they're incarnating, because only a part of their energy incarnates. Part of it always remains in spirit to be available and able to connect to you.
Well, I have to
Fabulous.
tell you, as you were saying that, I just felt this incredible love and reassurance. Thank you.
Well, that's the thing that Jordan tells me. We're all together. You know, living in the dead. You know, we are all together. There's nothing that separates us. You know, and the ones you love who are on the other side are a thought away. You can open the channel to them just by desiring to, just by thinking of them and loving them. The channel can open, and their love for us continues, regardless of whether they're incarnated or not. So these relationships go on forever. Nothing can change the love that exists between you and another soul. Nothing can change it. It's there, and you can access it if you want. And the power of that love is always available to you. So I just want to say that out loud.
Thank you, Matthew. We have time for one more question. Anybody? Okay. I just am getting such huge affirmation from, as you were saying that, Matthew, from my grandmother and my mom and my grandfather right now. It's like awesome. So thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this Q&A with us. It's been as enlightening as studying the book. And I just want to say thank you to you and Jordan for writing the book, because it's a really good entree into our soul purpose and how to be better in the world as we are right now. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Matthew. That was beautiful.
I'm glad so thank you all for your interest.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.